What's up, people? I am TJ Atomica, and today I have something very exciting to talk about. I'm sure some of you may know, but I am working on a book. Specifically, I'm talking about a book around Unreal Engine 5. This is something I've been working on with Pact, a publisher out of the UK, and I've been working on it for about a year, and it comes out very soon, next year. January 9th, I believe, is the date. So with that in mind, I thought as part of, me trying to get more involved with like my content creation and stuff like that, one of the things I'd really love to talk about is the book itself and do a little bit of an overview of the chapters and maybe even go through some of the principles or the tutorials that I go through in the book here with you as well in video form. Specifically, this is the first episode in a series I'm making to go alongside my new book, which is called Unreal Engine 5 Best Practices. And you can currently pre-order that from the Pact website or from Amazon, and I'll have those links in the description below. The idea is pretty simple. I want to give you an overview of each of the 13 chapters in the book, share some of my favorite sections, talk about why I wrote them, and hopefully give you some insights so that you can use them in your own projects. Think of this like a companion series. Not to replace the book necessarily, but more of like a casual, video-friendly way of digging into some of the ideas inside. And hopefully, if you enjoy what you're seeing here in the video, then the book will be of interest to you, no matter what. So, what is this book about? And, why did I even write it? When I started working in Unreal over a decade ago, I constantly felt like I was drowning in technical settings. I could make things look good, don't get me wrong, but I didn't always understand why they looked good, or why they didn't, especially. Over time, I realized that what's missing for a lot of developers and artists alike isn't just tutorials or documentation, it's a way of thinking. That's why I wrote Unreal 5 Best Practices. It's not just a big technical manual, it's more like a roadmap. That classic scene from Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
It helps you to take all of these massive, sometimes overwhelming tools that Unreal gives us and actually make sense of them in a way that allows you to share your vision. I've been using Unreal for like 13 years now. I'm talking all the way back from like UDK days, the Unreal Development Kit, sort of known as Unreal Engine 3 as well. So like pre-Unreal 4, and we're in Unreal Engine 5 now. And even today, since I've put all of my career eggs into the Unreal basket, I barely scratch the surface of fully understanding all of the intricate systems and possibilities within Unreal itself. For me, this book was designed so that it covers everything that I specialize in, from fundamentals like lighting and atmosphere to big production realities that you will find if you're working in a studio environment. These can be things like optimization or troubleshooting. And each chapter builds on the last. So by the end, you've got a full pipeline of skills you can lean on, whether you're making games, cinematic sequences, or even sort of, real-time interactive experiences. Though some more artsy, crafty, interactive experiences that you might see at a museum or at an art gallery, etc. And the part I'm very proud of with regards to this book is it's not just about copying settings or following a step-by-step recipe, though I do have step-by-step paths you can follow. It's more about approaching Unreal as a creative medium, a set of tools, which is ultimately what it is. And by the end of it, I want you to think like both an artist or a designer, but also a problem solver. A big part of what I've adopted with the way that I wrote this book was similar to how I was taught when I did my master's degree, which was the lecturers there already kind of expected me to understand how to use the tools I wanted to do. And we had an incredible range of different students in that class, from traditional artists, musicians, all the way up to myself who was dabbling with games and 3D software, etc. And a part of their teaching methodology was to take the approach that we're not going to teach you how to use software anymore. We're going to teach you how to creatively think about solving problems so that you can achieve what you want to achieve. And it was a really freeing learning experience. And this was many years ago now. But I really wanted to adopt that into the way that I was teaching myself, or teaching you, within the context of this book. So as much as it does have step-by-step guides, and it has obviously like, typical tricks and stuff that you can apply instantly, it also delves heavily into theory and a way to think about problem solving that is just so far beyond the scope that can be achieved in a 300-page plus book. One of the major problems I find with tutorials online often is that they are done within a vacuum, right? Which means for the particular context in which that tutorial is being taught, it works. But the second you try to apply that to something which is like a massive, project that's being handled by, 100 people, it quickly starts to run into problems because it isn't considering how these different systems actually communicate together in order to form a cohesive whole. And in order to be better at that, or in order to take some of these really awesome tutorials that you can find online and apply them in a way that can be used in a large production setting, you need to be able to think in a way that is creative in its problem-solving solutions. I hope that makes sense. So that's why I'm making the book. This is the first episode of this short series, so I think we just jump straight into chapter 1, and we start looking at what I wanted to talk about for that chapter, and my personal love when it comes to art, and my specialization that I do every day at work, which is lighting with Lumen and Advanced Lighting Techniques. So let's dive in. There's a reason I start the book with lighting. Lighting is the thing that sets mood, tells your players or the audience where to look, and it can make or break your scene. I've seen poor quality assets completely transformed by great lighting, and I've also seen gorgeous models fall flat because the lighting just wasn't working. That's why mastering lighting is one of the most important skills you can develop in Unreal, whether you're an artist, a level designer, or even a programmer trying to understand what makes a scene feel polished. Now, if you're new to Lumen, in short, it's Unreal's real-time global illumination system. If you're here watching this video, I'd be surprised if you haven't heard about it before, but if you haven't, that basically means that instead of baking your lighting, waiting for hours, and then having to redo everything, if you move a single object, you can see those changes instantly. For me, when I first experienced this was mind-blowing. Back in the early 2010s, baking light maps was my go-to, naturally, as it was for many people. But it was frustrating. It often killed creativity because it slowed iteration to a crawl. Lumen changes that. You move a light, you move a wall, and immediately you see how light bounces, how it fills a room, and how it affects the mood. This is phenomenal for game development and the iterative process, but it also just speeds everything up. I remember in university, we'd have to take entire computer labs just to render very, very basic frames out of like Maya and RenderMan, I think we were using at the time. And even in my professional work, when we'd use things like Redshift, we had a render farm that would take ages to render this stuff out. And if it wasn't right, you'd have to make those adjustments and then render again. Now, I can render out an entire scene on my basic computer in like a minute, and then if that doesn't work, I can send it back. And that's for rendering. In gameplay, it's just what you see is what you get for the most part. So one of my favorite sections of this chapter is a photo that I've got where I compare baked lighting to Lumen side by side, and I show the difference in realism, adaptability, and just workflow speed in general. It really drives home why the system is such an awesome leap forward, especially for us as lighting artists, but game devs in general. So in this chapter, there are a few sections that I'm especially proud of. First, the indoor lighting techniques I talk about. Lumen thrives in enclosed spaces where light gets to bounce around and fill those hidden corners. I like to show how you can blend natural sunlight through a window with artificial lights like lamps or overhead fixtures. And it sounds simple, but getting that balance right is one of the fastest ways to make a space feel real. Another section that I love is when I talk about like emissive materials and the way you can kind of use those to cheat your lighting, smoke and mirrors for lack of a better term. With Lumen, you can actually make your emissive surfaces contribute to the lighting. And that's awesome because that means things like neon signs, glowing panels, or even a fireplace can add dynamic light to your scene. And it really opens up so many creative possibilities for mood and atmosphere. And of course, I had to naturally conclude with outdoor lighting as an example as well. From controlling directional lights for realistic sun and shadow and using skylights for, fog and mood. And these things give the outdoor environment that cinematic quality. I even show you some of my own personal favorite tricks within Unreal, and all of this is designed to work as kind of the foundations of what leads into the next chapters of the book. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that just gets me really excited as a developer, and I hope it works for you as well. One of the other things I do is I like providing case studies. These case studies are usually things where I've taken, just for, the purpose of speed, I've taken Fab Marketplace asset and then I've relit it in a way that kind of showcases what I'm trying to show. Instead of having to build unique environments every single time, it's easier when I'm focusing specifically on lighting to just talk about it that way. So, for example, one of the case studies I go through is one about a moody dungeon scene. It's got like flickering torches, volumetric light. And this was a great example of how lighting can create tension and atmosphere, even if the geometry itself is pretty basic. But what's really cool about it is it also shows how, as designers, we can use light to guide the player to a very clear location. And as part of that, I have the different photos that show the layers of lighting development that goes into a scene, for example. The other example is a vibrant outdoor market, like full of stalls and props. It's lit by warm light of the sunset, and in that case I use an extra point light and rect light to create like subtle highlights in the shadows so that the scene feels alive and full of energy. And in the photo that you can see here, I've got like little squares that represent where those highlights are missing. It's subtle and you don't necessarily notice it upon the first view, but when those things aren't there, it can feel a lot flatter. And trust me, these examples aren't just about showing off pretty renders. They're about giving you starting points that you can use to build on your own projects. They're like little recipes to remix how you want. I know now, for me especially, a lot of the way that I learn is simply by observing the way that other people have done it and then adopting it into my own methodologies and practices. And then of course there's one final section of it, because this is Unreal, things don't always work perfectly. That's just true of any game engine. And Lumen can be demanding on hardware. So I also cover performance and troubleshooting. This is especially important to me because I still have a very, I say basic rig. I'm running like a 1080, and I know there are people with worse GPUs than that, but it's definitely not top of the line, and it's very, very limiting. So in order to be able to achieve like consistent 45 FPS in like real-time games and stuff while still using things like Lumen and Nanite and stuff like that, is very, very important to me. So being able to find those balances is important, and that's something I really wanted to sort of hammer home in the book as well. And that's why like the final, third of the book is dedicated to optimization and performance and just different like project settings and practices and stuff like that. Because when you're working in a situation where you might need to work across several platforms, that could be from a Switch and still developing for Switch all the way up to a 5090 PC, being able to make sure that the 5090 PC gets the best that it possibly can from rendering performance, so they get something really beautiful because they're clearly enthusiasts for that, but also making sure that the players on Switch still get a good game that is of acceptable visual quality for the power of the system, is really important to me, especially as a lighting artist. I want to be able to get the best of both worlds where I can. That means often you have to use Unreal's profiling tools, tweaking Lumen's quality settings within the post-process, and knowing where to fall back on alternatives when it's necessary, because the truth is, sometimes baked lighting still has its place, especially when you're targeting things like mobile or VR. So knowing when to use Lumen and when not to use Lumen is part of being a smart developer. And part of this chapter, talking about Lumen and lighting within Unreal, is talking about the fact that sometimes the best way to use Lumen is to not use Lumen. I know that sounds contradictory, but it is true. And again, that's the importance of thinking in a creative way more so than just adding settings to a scene because you feel like it or because a YouTube tutorial has told you to do so. So that's a very quick wrap on chapter 1. Still trying to figure out the layout for how I want to do these, but I hope it gives you an idea of what you can kind of expect within the chapters of this book. If you have any advice or any comments on what you think would be really cool on how to improve this particular series as I'm going through the other chapters of my book, please let me know. I'm more than happy to take advice and try and improve it so that it's relevant to you or helpful in any particular way. Again, of course, I obviously can't give away everything that's in the book itself, but I hope this at least gives you a great idea about some of the content that you will be able to find. This chapter is really the foundation of everything else in the book. Once you understand how to control light and mood, everything else from atmosphere to cinematic storytelling builds on top of that. And in the next episode, we'll actually dive into chapter 2, which is all about atmosphere, fog, weather, and my favorite, post-processing. Basically the secret sauce that takes good lighting and turns it into excellent lighting to hit that full cinematic level. If that sounds interesting to you, please hit subscribe. It helps a bunch and I really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments what kind of lighting setups that you're most curious about. I would love to create tutorials off to the side, specifically based off comments that you have. This could be things like environment lighting, or maybe it's character rigs. Any of that kind of stuff I find really fascinating to talk about. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. That's pretty much it. I've been TJ Atomica. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.